boys and girls. I hope that you guys are all continuing to stay safe and healthy during this quarantine. I'm definitely missing you all. If you are new to my Miss Crystal channel, I am reading Fudge-a-Mania by Judy Blume, this book right here. And this is going to be part 4, which starts at chapter 7. So if you'd like to read along, or if you'd like to listen to this in the background of whatever you're doing today, then let's get started. Chapter 7, The Best News of the Century. Mitzi was smaller than Fudge, with long hair tied in a ponytail. She wore a baseball glove on her left hand. Mrs. A introduced us to her as soon as we got to the house. "This is Fudge Feather," she said, "and this is his big brother, She put her finger to her mouth and paused. "Peter," I said, helping her out. I don't know why people can always remember Fudge's name, but not mine. "Yes," Mrs. A said, "Peter Feather." "Feather's a funny name," Mitzi said. "Actually, it's Hatcher," I told her, setting the record straight. "But I thought your uncle's name is Feather," Mrs. A said. "It is," Fudge told her. "His first name is Feather," I explained, before things got any more confused. "Feather Hatcher. Uncle Feather Hatcher." "Oh," Mrs. A said, laughing. "I get it now. So you're the Hatcher boys, not the Feather boys." "That's right," I told her. "I like Feather better," Mitzi said. "And Fudge isn't a name. It's a candy." "It's a name too," Fudge told her. "Right, Peter?" "That's right," I said. "Doesn't he have another name?" Mitzi asked me. "A real name?" "It's Farley," Fudge said. He stuck out his chin, daring her to say anything more. "Farley?" Mitzi said, opening her eyes really wide. "That's a real name?" "Yes," Fudge said. "Grandma," Mitzi said, "is Farley a name?" "It's a beautiful name," Mrs. A said. "There was once a handsome movie star named Farley Granger." She closed her eyes and kind of sighed. Then she went into the house to get us a snack. Sheila went with her. As soon as they were gone, Mitzi got shy. She looked at the floor of the porch. Then she looked at the ceiling. She socked her fist into her baseball glove to make the pocket deeper, but she didn't say a word. Fudge watched her and hummed a little tune. She didn't have anything to say either. I decided it was up to me to get things going between them, so I said, "That's a good-looking baseball glove." "I call it my Mitzi," she said, hugging it to her chest. "Big gave it to me." "Who's Big?" Fudge asked. "My grandpa," Mitzi said. "Big Apfel." "Big who?" I asked. Sure, I'd misunderstood her. "Big Apfel," she said again. I couldn't believe this. I kneeled beside her and spoke very slowly. "Are you telling us your grandfather is Big Apfel, the baseball player?" Mitzi nodded. "I have his baseball card," I said. "I know his stats by heart." "You want to play in his game?" Mitzi asked. "His game?" I said. She nodded again. "We play every Sunday." "Are you asking that anyone who wants to play ball with Big Apfel can?" "You have to pass the over-under test first." "What's the over-under test?" "You have to be over 4 and under 104. "And that's it?" I asked. "That's it," she said. "Yahoo!" I yelled, jumping so high I almost knocked over one of Mrs. A's hanging plants. "This is the best news I've ever heard in a long time." "Is it the best news of the century?" Fudge asked. "It could be," I told him, as I yahooed again. In a minute, all 3 of us were jumping up and down and yahooing all over the porch. That's when the perfect babysitter appeared, holding a pitcher of juice. "I'm gone for 5 minutes, she said. 5 minutes, and look at you, carrying on like a bunch of monkeys." "But honey," Fudge said, "it's the best news of the century." "What's the best news of the century?" Sheila asked. "Who knows?" Fudge said. "I don't even know what a century is." I ran all the way home. As soon as I got there, I called Jimmy Fargo. I'm not supposed to make long-distance calls without permission, but this was definitely a special occasion. I was still trying to catch my breath when Jimmy answered. "Are you sitting or standing?" I asked. "Standing?" "Well, sit down." "Okay," he said. "I'm sitting." "Where?" I asked. "What's the difference?" "I want to imagine how you look when I tell you the news." "I'm sitting on the floor in the kitchen," Jimmy said, "with my back against the refrigerator." "Okay, I've got the picture." "So what's the story?" Jimmy asked. "You're never going to believe who our neighbor is up here." I paused for a second and took a deep breath, then I dropped the news. "Big Apple." Jimmy didn't say anything. "You fainted, right?" I said. "No." "But you're speechless?" "No." "You don't believe me?" "I believe you," Jimmy said, "but I don't get it. Did you say Big Apple is your neighbor or what?" "I said Big Apple, Boston Red Sox, the greatest center fielder of all time." Ty Cobb was the greatest center fielder of all time. Or maybe Willie Mays. I wasn't going to argue with Jimmy. Instead, I explained that this was a chance for us to play ball with one of the greats. I reminded him to bring his glove and his Mets cap to Maine. Then I waited for him to say something. When he didn't, I asked, "Are you still there?" "I strike out a lot," he finally said. "Who doesn't?" "Probably Big Apple." "We're not talking about the major leagues. We're talking about your basic Sunday ball game." "Speaking of basic," Jimmy said, "how's it going with the Queen of Cooties?" I hardly ever see her. She's got a job, babysitting." "That's a relief," Jimmy said. I didn't tell him who she was babysitting. I couldn't get to sleep that night. I kept thinking about Jimmy and me playing ball on Big Apple's team, but that reminded me that Jimmy still doesn't know we're sharing a house with the Tubmans. I have to come up with a good excuse, and soon, or I'll never hear the end of it from him. I tossed and turned as Fudge babbled in his sleep. I gave him a kick and he rolled over. After a while, I got out of bed and tiptoed down the hallway to the bathroom. It's so quiet in the country and dark. In the city, it's never dark. You can always look out your window and see lights. It's never quiet either. You can hear the buzz of traffic even in the middle of the night. I used the toilet, then flushed, and that's when it came to me. The perfect excuse for sharing a house with the Tubmans. I flushed again and imagined myself telling Jimmy the long, sad story. I'd say, "See, when we first got to Maine, we moved into this big old house. It had 7 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, and you could see the ocean from every window. But unfortunately, there was a big problem." "What problem?" Jimmy would ask. "Poison gas," I'd say. "Poison gas in all the toilets. Green, steamy, gurgling stuff that bubbled up every time we flushed." "Ugh," Jimmy would say, making a terrible face. "Dad had to call the health inspector," I'd continue. She took one look and went nuts. "This is a disaster," she cried. "This is a serious environmental disaster." "So then what?" Jimmy would ask, biting his nails. She condemned the place. Even though she was sorry about ruining our vacation, she had no choice. The police came and boarded up the house. They nailed a sign to the front. "Warning! Poison gas in toilets. Flush at your own risk." "Wow," Jimmy would say. "You're lucky you got out alive." And I'd say, "Yeah, I know." A brilliant story, I told myself as I turned out the bathroom light. Jimmy's very big on environmental issues. He's got posters all over his room. Save the whales, save the dolphins, save the rainforest. So he'll understand that the Tubmans were just trying to save our vacation when they let us share their house. I went back to my room and got into bed. This time, I had no trouble falling asleep. Chapter 8, Fudge-a-Mania. "How come you're in such a bad mood?" Sheila asked me the next morning. "It must be the weather," I grumbled. Actually, it had nothing to do with the weather, which was as gray and damp as usual. It had to do with my brilliant idea from last night. Somehow, when I woke up this morning, my poison gas story sounded really weird. I wasn't sure Jimmy would buy it. And where would that leave me? After breakfast, I went back to bed. Dad says falling asleep when your body's not tired is a way of avoiding your problems. Maybe he's right, because when I woke up an hour later, I still didn't know what to do about Jimmy. I looked out the window. The sun was making an effort to break through the clouds. Maybe I shouldn't worry yet, I thought. A lot can happen in a week. The Tubmans might decide they've had enough of Maine. They might be gone by the time Jimmy gets here. I got out my baseball cards and went down to the porch. I was laying them out alphabetically by players' last names when Mitzi showed up. I still can't believe Mitzi's grandfather is Big Apfel. I wonder why Mrs. A didn't tell us about him, unless she's sick of people falling all over themselves when they find out who he is. I suppose I'd feel the same way if Dad were famous. Mitzi looked at my baseball cards. "That used to be my grandpa," she said when she spotted Big. "What do you mean, used to be?" I asked. "He's still your grandpa, isn't he?" "Yes, but he's different now. He has more fat." "He was probably a lot younger when they took this picture," I said, holding up his card. She nodded. "Where's Fudge?" "He's planting a garden with his babysitter." "Where's the garden?" "Behind the house." "Will you take me?" I started to tell her to go by herself. After all, she'd walked all the way to our house on her own. But she looked at me with those big eyes. "Sometimes monsters live behind houses," she said. And I didn't bring my monster spray. "Monster spray?" I said. "Grandma makes it for me. It's a secret formula. When you spray the monsters, they melt." Sounds like an interesting product. Dad would have a field day with it, I thought. He's in advertising. Commercials are his business. I can see it now. Mitzi's monster spray, made from a grandmother's secret formula. Spray twice a day and melt your monsters away. Mitzi held out her hand. Will you walk me around the house? How could I refuse? I walked her to the backyard where Sheila and Fudge were hard at work. They'd already dug out a plot of land. Now they were lining up a row of pink rocks from the beach. "You're planting rocks?" I asked. "Yes," Fudge said. "Rocks don't need sun or water. They don't get slugs. Animals can't eat them, and they never die." I looked at Sheila. "It was his idea," she said. "It was my idea," Fudge repeated. "I like this garden," Mitzi said. She got down on her hands and knees to help. "Mom and Dad are going to be surprised when they see your garden," I told Fudge. "I know," he said. "They're going to be surprised that you dug up this much grass to plant rocks, especially since this backyard doesn't belong to us." "Who does it belong to?" Fudge asked. "The people who own this house," I told him. "So," he said, "the people who own this house will be happy when they see my garden." "Maybe," I told him, "or maybe they'll say, 'Who dug up in our backyard?'" "Really, Peter," Sheila said, "you're such a worrier." "Yeah, Pete," Fudge said, "you worry too much." "I don't worry," I told them. "I think ahead." When the rocks were all planted, 6 rows of them, with 10 in each row, Mitzi scooped up a handful of dirt. "Now let's make mud pie." "Mud pie?" Fudge said. "That's what they have for dessert at Tico Taco, right, Pete?" "But it's not made of mud," I told him. "Then why do they call it mud pie?" he asked. "Because it looks like mud," I explained. "Yum, mud pie," Mitzi said, licking the dirt off her fingers. "Spit that out right now," Sheila told her. "That's full of bacteria." "Yum, bacteria," Mitzi said. "I love bacteria. Don't you, Fudge?" Bacteria's my favorite, Fudge said. Then he looked up at me. What's bacteria, Pete? They're like germs, I told him. Yum, germs, Mitzi said. Germs are really tasty. Cooties are tasty too, Fudge said, and slugs. Slugs are fat and juicy. You two are disgusting, Sheila said. Germy, germy, germs, said, and sluggy, sluggy, slugs, Mitzi sang. Yummy, yummy, down my tummy. Fudge held his arms straight out to the sides and began to twirl. Mitzi copied him. They twirled around and around, faster and faster, until they got so dizzy they fell into the ground, screaming and laughing. Then they started all over again. Stop that, Sheila shouted. We can't, Fudge yelled, twirling and whirling. It's a Fudge-a-Mania, Mitzi shrieked. Once you get it, you can never stop. I'm going to count to 3, Sheila shouted. But Sheila's threat didn't bother them. You better watch out, Fudge sang, because it's catching. He twirled over to me and swatted my behind. Now you've got it, Pete. You've got a Fudge-a-Mania too. I started twirling, slowly at first, then faster and faster until everything was a blur. I twirled over to Sheila and smacked her on the back. Look out, Sheila, you just caught it from me. I did not catch anything from you, Sheila shouted. I will never catch anything from you. The door to the house slammed and out marched Libby. She was wearing her Snoopy t-shirt. It's so big it hangs down to her knees. She stomped across the yard. Just what exactly is going on here? She asked. She didn't wait for an answer. And how am I supposed to sleep with this racket? Sleep? Mitzi asked. Now? Yes, now, Libby said. It's only 10 o'clock in the morning. You sleep until 10 o'clock in the morning? Mitzi said, like she couldn't believe it. Libby put her hands on her hips and glared. I try. But morning is the best time to play, Mitzi said. Who is this kid? Libby asked Sheila. Mitzi Apfel, Sheila said. A neighbor. I'm 5, Mitzi told her, and I walked here all by myself. I didn't need anyone to show me the way. I'll tell you what you need, Libby began. But Mitzi didn't wait to hear what Libby had to say. She raced off shouting, It's Fudge-a-Mania! Fudge followed Mitzi. Sheila chased both of them. You're all maniacs, Libby shouted. Fudge-a-Maniacs, I added. Either Libby didn't get my joke or she decided to ignore it because she said, This is all your fault, Peter. Chaos follows you and your family. Chaos, I said. I don't believe I know him. That got Libby really mad. Chaos, she yelled, a state of utter confusion or disorder. Then she stomped back to the house and went inside, letting the screen door slam behind her. I couldn't help laughing. When Mom and Dad saw Fudge's garden, I expected them to really let him have it. They've always taught us to respect other people's property. But when Fudge explained his reasons for planting rocks, Mom said, That's very good thinking. A good babysitter encourages creative thinking, Sheila said. But doesn't this show a lack of respect for other people's property? I asked. Well, Mom said, it would have been better if Fudge had checked with us before he started. But his idea was so well thought out. Rocks don't need sun or water. Animals can't eat them. Yeah, I said. I've heard all about it. Grandma wandered across the yard with Buzzy Sr. She took one look at Fudge's garden and said, Isn't my grandson an original, Buzzy? Actually, it was mostly my idea, Sheila said. That's not what you said this morning, I shouted at Sheila. This morning you said it was his idea. Just shut your face for once, Peter Hatcher, she shouted back. Who's going to make me? I yelled. Children, Grandma said. Let's be kind. Kind is a word your grandson doesn't know, Muriel, Sheila shouted. He knows it, Grandma said, but sometimes he forgets what it means. And she doesn't, I asked. Sometimes she forgets too, Grandma admitted. I don't see why you two can't get along as well as your dogs, Buzzy Sr. said. I looked toward the house. Turtle and Jake were playing together. You'd think Turtle would show more loyalty. You'd think he'd understand about Sheila and me. Tootsie grabbed my leg. Up, Pete, up. Not now, I said. Now. But I wasn't in the mood for baby tricks, so I shook her off and she fell over on her backside. It took a few seconds for her to react. Then she scrunched up her face, her mouth started twitching, her breath came fast. She made her little hands into fish, shut her eyes tight, and opened her mouth. Wah! Once she got going, you could hear her a mile away. What happened, Tootsie Pie? Dad asked as he lifted her into his arms. Tootsie kept screaming and Mom looked at me. Was that necessary, Peter? Was what necessary? I said. Mom just shook her head. You see how much trouble you caused for everyone? Sheila shouted at me. How come I'm getting blamed for this? I thought all I did was ask one simple question. Fudge held up his arms up to Mom. Up, he said. Up. You want to play baby? Mom asked. Goo goo gaga, Fudge said, jumping into Mom's arms. You're getting heavy, Mom said, planting a kiss on his head. But not too heavy for Mommy, right? I shook my head, then turned away and watched Dad galloping around the yard with Tootsie on his shoulders. In a minute, Tootsie was laughing. I remember when Dad carried Fudge that way. And there's a photo of me on his shoulders, too. I'm laughing really hard and grabbing Dad's hair. He had a lot more to grab then. Go, horsey, Tootsie called as Dad galloped in the other direction. Being a baby is so easy, I thought. Riding around on Dad's shoulders, knowing he'd never let you fall, and doing and saying whatever you please without worrying about what the other guy will think. Grandma put her arm around my shoulder. It's not easy being the firstborn, is it? I looked at her and smiled. She knew exactly what I was feeling. Chapter 9, Dizzy from Izzy. I hung out at the beach almost all day on Friday, hoping to catch a glimpse of Big Apple. I guess Mrs. A finally noticed because she came out on her porch and said, If you're looking for Fudge, he's down at the tide pool with Mitzi and Sheila. I'm not looking for him, I explained. I just wanted to ask Big a question about the game. As soon as I said Big, I wondered if I should have called him Mr. Apple instead. But Mrs. A acted as if it was okay. She said, Big's on a fishing trip. He'll be back in a few days. A few days? What about the game on Sunday? I asked. There's no game this Sunday, Mrs. A said. It's the annual antique show. They set it up on the high school field. Antique show? Yes, Mrs. A said. And Big gets so upset about the game being canceled, he has to leave town. But don't worry, he'll be back before next Sunday. Big never misses a ball game. I guess Mrs. A could tell how disappointed I was because she said, I just baked chocolate chip cookies. No, thank you, I said. I'm not very hungry. I ran home and announced the bad news. No ball game this Sunday because of some dumb antique show. I read about that in the local paper, Mom said. I think we should go. Forget it, I told her. You're not getting me anywhere near those stupid antiques. It's good there's no game, Fudge said, because I still don't have a Mitzi. He looked at Dad. He's been begging for a Mitzi ever since Mitzi showed him hers 2 days ago. Tomorrow afternoon, Dad told him. Promise? Fudge asked. Promise, Dad said. When Mitzi came over the next morning, Fudge said, I'm getting my Mitzi this afternoon. That's nice, Mitzi said, but she was more interested in the book she was carrying than in Fudge's baseball glove. Did you know I can read? She asked. So can I, Fudge said. Mitzi held up her book and pointed to the title. What does this say? I can't read everything, Fudge said. I can read Hop on Pop and dinosaur books. I don't know if he can really read Hop on Pop or if he's memorized it. But it's true that he knows all the words. The name of this book is Tell Me a Mitzi, she said, smiling. Is it Pete? Fudge asked. Is it Pete? Fudge asked. That's what it says, I told him. Fudge looked surprised. Mitzi opened the book, and it's all about me and my baby brother Jacob. You don't have a baby brother, Fudge said. I do so, and his name is Jacob. Where is he? In Boston with Mommy and Daddy. He's not old enough to visit Grandma and Big by himself. He can't even talk, and he makes poop in his diaper. So does Tootsie, Fudge said. I hold my nose when Jacob gets changed, Mitzi said. I hold my nose when Tootsie gets changed, Fudge said. One time, Jacob got into his diaper and played with his poop, Mitzi said. Ooh, and it was so bad. This conversation is getting pretty bad, I told them. They looked at each other and laughed. Let me see that book, Fudge said. Mitzi handed it to him and flipped through the pages. How come it's about you? Because I'm special, Mitzi said. That afternoon, I went to town with Dad and Fudge. The sports store had only one baseball glove, small enough to fit him, but he didn't mind. Now I have my own Mitzi, he told the clerk. Yes, the clerk said, I guess you do. And if you put a few drops of oil on it every day, you'll make it nice and soft. A few drops of oil, Fudge repeated as we left the store. He was wearing his glove and kept punching his fist into it the way Mitzi had with hers. When Dad told us he had to stop off at Sawyer's Market, Fudge asked if he could go to the library. Sure, Dad said. The library is next door to Sawyer's. From the outside, it looks like a little house. There are pots of flowers on the steps and even a screen door. But inside, it's like a regular library. I left Fudge in the children's room and headed for the sports section. There were a lot of books about baseball. I was browsing through one that looked interesting when Fudge tugged at my shirt. I can't find it, he said. Find what? The book I want. I figured he was looking for something like Your Favorite Brontosaurus or The Last Tyrannosaurus Rex, so I asked, Go ask the librarian. You come too. I'm busy. Please, Pete, this is important. Oh, all right. I walked him to the checkout desk. The regular librarian wasn't there. Instead, there was a girl, maybe 16 or 17. She wore a pin on her shirt that said Library Assistant. She was reading a book. It must have been really good because she didn't even notice we were standing in front of her until Fudge spoke. Do you have Tell Me a Fudge? He asked. I almost fell through the floor. Pardon? The girl said, looking up at us. Her eyes were deep, dark brown like the best chocolate. Tell me a fudge, she repeated. That's the book I want. It doesn't sound familiar, she said. It could be called Tell Me a Farley, Fudge said. I coughed twice, but she didn't even glance my way. Did you look it up in the card catalog? She asked Fudge. No, Fudge said. Well, let's give it a try. Our computer's down today. She marked her place in the books. She marked her place in the book she was reading. When she crossed it, I tried to read the title upside down. I think it's called Beginner's Love, but I'm not sure. Fudge followed her to the card catalog, and I followed Fudge. What's your name? She asked. Isabel. What's your name? He asked. Isabel, she said, but my friends call me Izzy. Izzy, he said. I like that. What's yours? She asked him. Farley, he said, but my friends call me Fudge. Oh, Isabel said. What an interesting name. She thumbed through the cards in the tea drawer. We have Tell Me a Mitzi and Tell Me a Trudy, but I don't see Tell Me a Fudge or Tell Me a Farley. It has to be there, Fudge said. Isabel went through the cards again. Nope, I'm sorry. Fudge scrunched up his face and his breath came fast. Oh no, I thought, he wouldn't. Not here, not now. But I was wrong. It's not fair, he cried, throwing himself on the floor. Then he kicked and he banged his fist and he screamed, "It's not fair!" Isabel looked at me. I wanted to disappear. Lucky for us, there were only a few other people in the library. One woman came over to see what was happening, but she wasn't impressed. She shook her head, then went back to the stacks where she'd been browsing. A man stuck his head out of a reading room and called, "Quiet, please. This is a library." But Fudge kept on kicking and screaming and banging his fists. "Stop," I hissed. "You're making a scene." "I can't help it," he cried. "You're too old for this." "I'm not too old. I'm only 5. I would have walked right out and left him there, except for Isabel. She kneeled beside him. "Fudge," she said very softly. Fudge looked at her. His face was blotchy red and his nose was runny. "Who knows more about a Fudge or a Farley than you?" "Nobody." "Exactly," she said. "So maybe you should write this book yourself." "I can't write," Fudge said. "My fingers hurt from just printing my name." "Maybe you can tell the stories to someone, like your brother, and he'll write them down for you." Isabel smiled at me as if we were sharing some secret. I think I smiled back, but I'm not sure. I felt like I was in a dream and everything was happening in slow motion. Fudge sat up. "I'll think about it," he said. Isabel handed him a tissue from her pocket, but he doesn't know how to blow his nose, so he just wiped the whole mess across his face. Then he stood, took Isabel's hand, and walked back to the checkout desk with her. "That's a nice-looking baseball glove," she told him. "I call it my Mitzi," Fudge said, "and I'm going to oil it every day to keep it nice and soft." I wondered if Isabel oiled her skin. I wondered if it felt as soft as it looked. My mind drifted off. I pictured myself on a desert island with Isabel. "It doesn't matter that I'm years younger than you, Peter." "It doesn't matter that I'm years older than you, Peter," she was saying, "because you're so mature for your age." Fudge tugged at my hand. "Pete." "What?" "I'll go tell Dad we're done, okay?" I nodded. As soon as Fudge was gone, Isabel said, "Did you want to check that out?" When I didn't answer, she reached for the book I was holding. "Do you have your card?" she asked. "My card?" "Yes." "Your library card?" "No, I guess I forgot it." "That's okay. I can hold the book for you until next Saturday." "Next Saturday," I said. I don't know how I got out of there. My legs were shaking so bad. I was feeling kind of weak all over and dizzy too. Fudge came out of Sawyer's Market just as I came out of the library. "Dad says he's next in line. He'll meet us back at the car." He stopped for a minute and looked at me. "What's wrong, Pete?" "Nothing. Why?" "You look weird. Are you going to puke?" "No, I'm just a little dizzy." "Put your head down," he said. That's what Mom always tells me when I'm dizzy. "I'm not that kind of dizzy," I said. "Oh, it's more like I'm floating," I started to sing. "Who can explain it? Who can tell me why?" That night when I got into bed, I stared into my Kreskin's crystal and repeated Isabel's name over and over. I didn't care that her friends call her Izzy. To me, she'd always be Isabel, a beautiful name, a name that really fits her. If I were the amazing Kreskin, I'd be able to plan all my dreams. I'd probably be able to transfer thoughts from my head into Isabel's and make her dream about me. I'd close my eyes and concentrated. Isabel, Isabel. But when Fudge came racing into the room, he took a flying leap and landed on my bed. I hid my Kreskin's crystal under my pillow where he couldn't get his hands on it. "I'm ready to start my book," he announced. "I'll say it and you write it down." "Why don't you wait until tomorrow? Then your babysitter can write it down for you." "I can't wait, Pete." "Why not?" "Who can explain it? Who can tell you why?" He laughed as he handed me paper and pencil. There was no way he was going to give up. The sooner I started writing, the sooner I'd be able to get back to Isabel. So I took the pencil and said, "Okay, let's go." "Tell me of Fudge," he said, by Farley Drexel Hatcher. Chapter 1. How Turtle Got His Name. He waited while I wrote that down. Then he yawned. "That's it for tonight, Pete. Tomorrow I'll write Chapter 2. "I can hardly wait," I told him. He got into his own bed, and 2 seconds later he was out cold. I took my Kreskin's crystal from under my pillow and held it tightly. "Isabel, Isabel, tell me an Isabel." I had a dream that night, but it wasn't about Isabel. It was about Sheila Tubman. I woke up feeling really disappointed. And I'm going to stop there. See you guys next time.